the role of the CEO is critical. So even if you have an engaged executive that you're reporting to or an engaged board, if the CEO is not on board, you will find it incredibly challenging. And that has been the biggest source of angst that we've seen from professionals in the sector, is that they just can't get things across the line because it's not a priority of the CEO.
Welcome to The Greener Way. I'm your host, Michelle Baltazar, Executive Director of Media at FS Sustainability. We are recording on Gadigal land, and we pay our respects to the traditional custodians of country and elders past, present, and emerging. Before we start, I'd like to greet everyone who's listening right now a very happy new year and hope that you had a restful break over the festive season. For our first podcast in 2026, I thought it would be great to kick off with what's new in the world of executive search and recruitment in the sustainability sector. Joining us to share his insights is today's guest, Richard Evans, the founder and CEO of Talent Nation. Richard, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Michelle.
Go back to sometime last year where you shared a post on LinkedIn that struck a chord with the community because it raised the rather confronting issue of poor retention rates of ESG professionals within many organizations. So tell us about that. Why did you write that post and what was the feedback?
Yeah, look, this is something that has been a focus of ours for some time. And being a recruitment company, churn is something that is a concern for us. We want to make sure that if we're placing people into roles or finding the right roles, that it's a great fit for them and that they're able to build a career with the organisation. So we're not looking for a short-term placement. We want a 3 to 5 year or longer career for that individual. So seeing people jump from role to role is something that is of grave concern to us. And so it is something that we have been measuring for some time. It is, I guess there's a number of reasons behind why people are moving. Early career, they're often being headhunted into roles and being promoted really, really quickly. Yeah, and particularly looking at some of the technical elements of sustainability, it's moving very quickly. So people are coming up to speed very quickly around what's required from a technical standpoint, but then they're being thrust into situations where they don't have executive support or they don't have a manager or a mentor to draw from, and they're being exposed. So technically they can do the role, but in terms of having to deal with a board, having to deal with an executive, having to work with decision makers internally, where this is not a priority, is becoming more and more challenging. And I guess it also links back to UN Global Compact ran a conference 18 months ago and surveyed the attendees there. And the number of people that were saying that they were burnt out or just on the edge was significant. And so that's something that we've actually built into this year's survey as well, in terms of who's feeling stretched, who's uncomfortable, who's burnt out, and just looking at some of the stats here, there's 55% of people either stretched and having an impact through to actually being burnt out and just hanging in there. So there's an increased demand in terms of workload, but also pressure as well, and particularly with things like mandatory disclosures coming in. It's just another layer that's being built on top.
So based on this survey and even anecdotal evidence of people feeling burnt out, not supported, what were the top 3 reasons why people are leaving every 12 to 18 months, for example?
So we've surveyed people at different levels of experience. So just to anchor some of those points there. So the highest turnover is in the kind of 25 to 30 year bracket. So early career, 40% of people that we surveyed changed roles within the last 12 months and 69 past 2 years. So there's a lot of movement happening there. A big component of that is that there are more opportunities for them. So they'll step into a role, they'll gain experience, and then particularly with the Group 2 reporters, they need someone with experience, but they don't need someone senior. And so there's a lot of opportunities at that level. So I guess that is one of the drivers. And then when they do step into that role, if they're in the role for 6 or 12 months and the organisation is not set up to support them, they're highly exposed. So it's very attractive to move into another organisation where they do have the support and they know the questions to ask as well during the interview process to make sure that they're not going to find themselves in the same position again. Yeah, and I think as well, we look at priorities and challenges, and the key challenges that were raised across all roles were competing business priorities, reduced budgets, and available headcount to complete the volume of work. So basically, businesses are focusing on trying to make sure that they can keep the lights on. There has been a significant economic downturn over the last couple of years. Budgets are tight, so trying to find funding for some of these initiatives. And then it's hard to get the headcount or to get resources to deliver the work. So people are working harder, they're working longer hours, and that's where that burnout is coming from. And new opportunities look a lot more attractive when you're struggling where you are currently.
So this is not just a headache for both parties. So you moving from one organization to the other, there's the element of risk there as well.
Absolutely.
But also as the organization, it could damage your reputation to see, well, why are the ESG professionals or your ESG staff leaving? So
Yep.
what are the solutions for this? What's been the feedback from your clients, or what feedback have you given to your clients?
So it's really important that you hire at the right level for the role that you're looking for, and I guess understand your needs as well. One of the challenges is when it's the first time an organisation have hired this role, we've seen position descriptions that have been generated using AI,
Oh
uh,
no.
and everything's in there, and you look at, you pull it apart, you go, okay, well,
Yes.
why do they need to have an understanding of European legislation? And they don't. It's
Mm.
just something that they've pulled together. So a lot of what we do is actually consult with the organisations to go, well, what do you need, and what are the priorities? Because you can look at it and go, well, yes, we can aspire for best practice, but the reality is we're just getting started and we just need to get the basics in place. And so we need to start from a risk and compliance perspective and have someone that understands the organization and have that pragmatic mindset. So I guess it's getting the alignment of the skills and capability, but also mindset of the individual with the role that needs to be done. So that biggest element, bringing it back to your original question, is just that mismatch between what you actually need and what you would like or what you think you might need.
So for our listeners who work for maybe super funds or an ASX listed company, are
Yeah.
there any signs like you don't want to wait until they resign before you ask them, well, how can we make this a better job environment for you, or more fulfilling or more aligned with your expectations? How do you have those conversations?
It's a really interesting question because you can't just walk in and go, okay, well, how do we make it easier for you, or what do you need if they need more resources? Because there may be budget constraints. A lot of the responsible investment roles or a lot of the funds are international funds, and so the decisions aren't being made here. And it is very challenging to get additional resources. So that then makes it hard to go in and have the conversation, say, okay, well, what do you need? With an asterisk that says, as long as it's not additional resources or more headcount. Where I've seen it work effectively is just that prioritization of tasks and accountabilities, and ensuring that the individuals that are responsible for what they need to undertake are really clear on what their deliverables are and what the priorities are. Because as well, we've had a profession where historically people have said no to sustainability, or they've had to really battle to get traction. And then they moved into a phase where people would say yes, or the organization would say yes. And so there was that excitement around, okay, we've got traction, we can do things. And then it's tightened up. And so there's still that approach of trying to deliver everything, but you don't have the resources. So again, it's having the conversation, understanding where the pain points are and how you can address them, but also looking at, where are the priorities? Yes, we've said we want to do all of these things, but the reality is if we do that, we're going to burn this person out, or they're going to leave, and then that's actually going to set us back further.
There's also the view that the silos between the sustainability teams and the management teams are blurring, if you like, and there's more of an integration where people don't feel like, oh, you're team A and you're team B. Are you finding that as well in terms of the job or the positions available at the moment?
Historically, people within the space have been led by the heart. They've come into the roles because they want to do the right thing. And if this was a video, you'd see the inverted commas either side of my head. You need to be pragmatic. And I think what we've seen, and particularly with roles like the Chief Sustainability Officer, where often they're not a sustainability professional, they're an executive that has accountability for sustainability. And we see that in this year's iteration of the report. There's a lot of blended roles in there, so it's sustainability and another function. So the sustainability roles have become far more commercial and far more anchored in business. We're also seeing with disclosures as well that, does it sit in finance? Does it sit in sustainability? What's the crossover between the functions, and where does the accountability sit? So yeah, certainly we are seeing that blurring of the lines between the different roles, and it's essential. If you are a professional within the space, you need to understand how to pull a business case together. That has been one of the challenges and some of the churn that we've seen with individuals being promoted really quickly into roles, is that they will step into a executive meeting and talk to the CFO, and the CFO really doesn't care about the programs that they're running. The CFO cares about the financial performance of the organisation and the risks associated with it. So you have to be able to present your points in the interest of what the stakeholders care about.
Yes, and I guess that goes back to what you said about support. So it has to be, hey, if this is your first executive meeting or these are the requirements, rather than, just telling this person, here's an additional diary appointment to consider. We've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the burnout and the stakeholder pressures. Now let's talk about opportunities. Can you give us some insights on what are the jobs that are in demand at the moment? What are the positions in demand? And secondly, let's talk numbers. Are salaries going to be lower, same, or higher in 2026?
So the roles in demand, I feel like a broken record here. It's disclosures and compliance. So it's not necessarily the really senior roles that we're seeing. It's the roles that will ensure that the organisation is set up to deliver on those requirements. So we're seeing a lot of those roles around sustainability reporting, disclosures. We're also seeing fractional roles coming into play a lot more as well. So senior professionals that have maybe stepped out of an exec role or a head of role that are looking for hybrid positions. So they will step into an organisation for 3 months, 6 months, or on a part-time basis. So the organisation gets senior capability and the individual is able to flex around their current needs as well. If they're looking to transition into a hybrid career or board roles. So we are starting to see blended roles come through, which is really exciting to see, because it means that an organisation can hire someone at an executional level, but get that support from someone more senior who can step in and help the board reports or the exco meetings every month or every 2 months, whilst managing the budgets. We're still seeing a lot of appetite for data and analytics as well. So with non-financial disclosures and the ability to pull that information together. So that has been solid for the last kind of 18, 24 months. So salaries have increased marginally, but not significantly. And I guess what we've seen is it's been more mid-career professionals that salaries have lifted, and that reflects, the rapid promotions, and people being progressed through into more senior roles. I guess as well, the sector is maturing, and as the sector continues to mature, the seniority lifts as well, and so overall, that is shifting the salaries upwards.
And finally, for those who are looking at perhaps looking for a new role or they just want to make sure that they're in the right place, what is the tilt between supply and demand this year in the sector?
So the tilt really depends on where you're at in your career and the type of work that you're doing. So if you've got experience across disclosures, if you're across the standards at ASRS, then demand for your skills is really high and supply is low, and that's going to continue for the next 18 to 24 months. So, and we have seen that with organisations that are trying to grapple with this and latching onto individuals that have got those skills, because otherwise they need to engage consultancies to do the work, and the consultancies are struggling to build those skill sets as well. I guess where it is a little bit lighter is those really senior roles and the influencing roles, because we have shifted to compliance away from leadership in this space. And so we have seen individuals step out of those roles, or organisations make the decision to pull back in terms of the investment in that leadership position. But that will shift again. I anticipate that it'll be 12 months' time, and then we'll start to see organisations that have done their first round of disclosures and now looking at what do they do with that, and how do they actually leverage the information that they've got to improve the business. And we're seeing elements of that starting to come through now with those fractional CSO roles.
Well, it sounds like 2026 could be the year for those who are just starting in the industry, but also those who are experts or at senior exec level that can do it as a hybrid role. Richard, once again, thank you for joining us. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
The report will be out at the end of this month, and you and I will probably have a follow-up chat or around the contents of that report, because it's always interesting to see the insights come from that. I think for individuals that are maybe thinking about making a shift or a transition, the key is to make sure you're drawn to a role rather than being propelled from a role. And it can be very hard once you make the decision to move on from where you are, to not let all the little things at work frustrate you and make new opportunities look more attractive. So I think being deliberate around the roles that you do want to look at. So look at what you do enjoy, what you're good at, the bits, the elements of your job that do really excite you, and then test that with the new roles that you're looking at. And then also look at the leadership of the organisation, particularly for more senior roles. The role of the CEO is critical. So even if you have an engaged executive that you're reporting to or an engaged board, if the CEO is not on board, you will find it incredibly challenging. And that has been the biggest source of angst that we've seen from professionals in the sector, is that they just can't get things across the line because it's not a priority of the CEO. So I think doing your due diligence and making sure that if you are stepping into a role, that you're not going to get frustrated, that you are going to be able to achieve what you hope to achieve in that organisation, but also factor in where we're at in the cycle at the moment, and that it may be 6 to 12 months of compliance before you can really start to lean into the really interesting work.
Thanks, Richard. That sounds like a list of very practical and very insightful tips for those of you who are listening and thinking about your next career move. Once again, if you're interested in this annual report that Talent Nation produces, it's called the ESG Environment and Sustainability Remuneration and Sector Insights Report. Out later this month, we will share a link on our show notes. But once again, Richard, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Michelle. Good to be here.
Once again, this is The Greener Way. I'm your host, Michelle Baltazar. Thank you for listening.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement, and if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.